Tales from my D&D campaign.
Previously, the players entered the ancient Ataran temple of Ginneron, searching for a magic spoon, some missing dwarves, and a small force of Kuatoa killers. So where's the underground base? Oh yes, the facility's over here. The Warforged, whose name turned out to be Temple 1, walks over and touches a spot on the wall a little below waist height, and a seamless hidden door opens. Unlike the spotless temple, the tunnel floor has a coat of dust an inch deep. In the middle, the dust was much thinner, like it had been disturbed by many footsteps, but enough time had passed for new dust to settle. And that makes sense because over a month ago, Diluvians broke into here, and weeks before that, De Corso's steward led a team of dwarves down into Ginneron, and the party were rearing to go, but then Black was like, "Wait, the door was closed, right? What if these other guys went down there and just couldn't get out?" And that seemed like a good point. So they get Temple 1 to come out and show them the hidden button on the tunnel side. And before letting him go, they try it themselves to make sure it isn't keyed to Warforged or something stupid like that. Now they're all set to explore. But then Little One is like, "Wait, he came out here to help. So you can leave the temple?" "Well, yes. Could you come show us around?" "I suppose I can. Though my station is the temple, my knowledge of the facility as a whole is limited." So they travel down a ways until the tunnel levels off and emerges into Tron. Actually, the main space of Ginneron was an inverted, extruded step pyramid, 100 feet wide at the top, getting 10 feet narrower for every 40 feet down. Each step is crossed by a long metal bridge with a low handrail and surrounded by a 10-foot ring of water lit by glowing bands around the edges and in the corners. And Black's like, "Those railings aren't very helpful." "They seem fine to me." And Temple 1 realizes they've stopped, and he's like, "Is something wrong?" Well, whatever they had expected to find in Ginneron, it wasn't this. Even their archaeologist, Greypike, was a little out of his depth. "I mostly explore dwarven stuff, ruins that actually make sense." And faced with this, they grill Temple 1 for everything he knows about the place. And while he can't answer most of their questions, he does know the general layout enough to help them sketch this shopping mall quality map. They now have a list of all the area names to work from, so they try to plan out whether they should follow the bridges and the natural flow of the dungeon, or try to skip areas by dropping down at one of these points where a high walkway overlaps a lower one. Draven is high enough level to cast Fly a couple times per day, but that spell only lasts a few minutes, and he doesn't have enough daily magic to affect everyone with it, so their vertical mobility is mostly limited to ropes and climbing. For the most part, they decide to take things in order, at least to begin with, because they're a little leery of falling into dark water of unknown depth, except for Little One, who was tempted to go swimming. That being said, they do skip the staff living quarters because Draven and Greypike heard the sexy word, library. The passages are pretty linear, all lined with blue metal plates, so they go down some stairs and cross the second bridge to the lobby of the library section, where they see a big mural depicting a bunch of Warforged performing all sorts of tasks and generally praising their creators, who appear as short-robed figures. And all the heroes and dwarves looked at them and thought, "Oh, the Atarans were gnomes!" Except for Angel, because sure, they were closer in stature to gnomes than they were to dwarves or halflings, but telling a gnome that these Atarans were gnomes is kind of like telling a person of Japanese ancestry that they look Chinese, or vice versa. Or that's what I told Angel it should feel like, but Angel much preferred the notion that she was somehow related to these super advanced ancients, so what you gonna do? And they find the library is a big room filled with 8-foot-tall floor-to-ceiling shelves, which seemed awfully inconvenient since it was all designed for gnome-sized Atarans, but Angel quickly discovered that if you touch a shelf above gnome shoulder height, that section slides down into the floor to let you reach the higher books. Or that's how it would work, except that there aren't books so much as lumpy piles of dust now, thanks to the passage of centuries in this humid environment. A few piles have slightly more integrity, but to describe what remains of them as pages would be hopelessly optimistic. Well, they don't give up so easily, and Angel and Greypike both search around and frig with the bookcases. When they slide down, a chunk of stone comes down out of the ceiling to keep them in place. But the relic hunters find, opposite to the entrance, a pair of bookcases which don't have material above the top shelf, and in fact, these shelves sink all the way down into the floor, revealing a second hidden library almost identical to the first. Actually, it's a little too identical to the first. There are a lot more dusty piles that actually look like books, but they pretty much disintegrate when you touch them. All except for 2 books which are totally intact, and they don't need Draven's analysis to know that those 2 are the magical ones. The black one turned out to be a martial tome, practically a picture book, except the diagrams were of Warforged fighting various undead monsters, and it worked a little bit like the famous stat tomes of Dungeons & Dragons. On the one hand, the effect was much more modest than the famous +1 int, +1 strength sort of books. Studying this tome for a few weeks gave the user a permanent +1 competence bonus to damage rolls against all undead creatures, as long as the reader was a skilled combatant to start out with. On the other hand, this tome was reusable, unlike those powerful stat boosting ones, so that was a little cool. The garish bright orange book was a very strange item. In game terms, it counted as a shield with a base bonus of 0, but as long as you hold it in one hand, it gives a +1 deflection bonus to armor class, and a +1 competence bonus to all saving throws, and a bonus to sense motive checks as well. They couldn't translate most of the Ataran writing on the fly, but Draven and Greypike were pretty sure the big rune on the cover translated as avoiding overreaction. Fortunately, reading the inside is not required for it to work. So while they figure that out, Angel is still poking around, trying to see if there's a super ultra secret third library or something, but it doesn't look like it. She keeps searching for secret doors while sliding down each of the bookcases just to check, and she finds one in the corner which, slides down like all the others, slides back up, but if you touched it at a low spot near the bottom shelf, it slides upwards from the fully up position. And there's a hiss of air rushing into a compartment which had remained effectively vacuum sealed ever since the facility fell out of use, and inside are 5 non-magical books, which have survived the centuries intact, which is possibly more exciting to certain party members than the magical tomes were. And Angel's like, "You're welcome." But it would take way too long to translate those now, so they stuff them in one of the party's extra-dimensional backpacks, never leave home without one, and they continue on to the next room, the Fey Lab. Temple 1 pointed out the spot, and you couldn't even see the door, but there was a roughly 1 centimeter hole about 7 feet up, deformed as though the hole had been punched outwards from the inside. And Raven's like, "Punched outward?" And Daggerface is like, "The metal is different here. I think it's part cold iron." Cold iron? Cold iron? Well, it is called the Fey Lab. Cold iron works on Fey stuff, right? True, so the walls here contain cold iron to hold in whatever is in there. Was in there. But the hole is so small, and Little One lifts Angel up so she can look through the hole. She has every kind of vision known to man, but it's a tiny hole in an inch-thick wall, so she doesn't see anything much in her little field of view. Unlike the other doors, this one turns out to be locked, but as a rogue, Angel can pick even magical locks. I don't know how that works, but I'm not a D&D rogue. So the door slides upward, but it jams after only a foot because of the deformation around the hole, and they can see that none of the light bands in the room are working. The darkened lab has workbenches like surgery or dissecting tables, and numerous magnifying glasses and cold iron tongs, scalpels, and other tools. But what's really odd is 2 walls of the room are lined with crystalline tubes, and each one is cracked, even though the crystal is actually very tough. It looks like the Atarans were experimenting on maybe dissecting some kind of fey creatures. I'm not sure how I feel about that. They were cutting up fairies? Well, fey things. They aren't all fairies. So they left all these things in the tubes, then they escaped, and they got out of the room through a finger-sized hole? Maybe it was little fairies. I had these image of the Atarans as these sophisticated, civilized magic experts, but capturing creatures, containing them, and then cutting them open with scalpels and tongs, it seems barbaric. It's science. Depends how intelligent the subjects are. So far, this place is deserted. Since passing through the temple into Ginneron, they haven't seen a single creature or construct, living or dead. But they continue on. Each bridge is a little shorter as they descend through the main empty space, and they're about halfway down now. They can see the first bridge 80 feet above them. They investigate the Fell Lab, and what happened here was more obvious. The lower half of the metal door had been broken wide open by repeated heavy blows. The light bars are still working, revealing a layout that mirrors the Fey Lab, only the tubes here were all metal without the translucent crystal sections, and they were much wider. The overturned metal cart also has a much larger box, and Draven and Daggerface note that the metal and tools here are not cold iron, just the same bluish metal as the bridges and regular walls. Moving down a level, the next section is supplies and water purification, and here they see a dog-sized construct skitter across the hall. They can hear more of them moving around. What was that? Are they intelligent? Will they attack us? And Temple 1 explains that they are worker machines, which do basic maintenance around the facility as directed by the controller. And they were never intended as security. Back when the facility was in use, it was guarded by Warforged soldiers. So they advance to find an intersection of 3 doors, and the right door has like a water tank and a bunch of pipes. And the middle door is a storeroom full of tools and spare parts, and there's nothing very interesting, but it's all antique, so they stuff their extra-dimensional backpacks with like $3 grand worth of stuff they can sell. And the left door has Yes, swarming with workers, the hallway is blocked by metal wall pipes cut and interwelded at angles, tight enough that even Angel couldn't squeeze through to the door at the far end. Whatever that's all about, it's not going anywhere. And Angel spots 2 more of the constructs dragging a third into the area Temple 1 called mechanical. And Draven's like, dragging? A damaged one? He did say that's where he went for repairs. So Angel starts to creep across the bridge, and after 10 feet, she's hit by a crossbow bolt for 19 damage, and she's like, ow, can I see who shot me? And there on the edge of her dark vision is a hooded Kuatoa with a crossbow, plus a couple other guys who are definitely not KT. They turn out to be Triton slaves, a rare aquatic race with the terrifying power to summon elementals. And at their call, an earth and an air elemental attack the heroes on the bridge. Well, attack may be a bit of a strong word, as little one shots the earth elemental, because Tritons only summon medium-grade elementals, and it turns out medium elementals suck. They suck so much I retconned it so that Tritons, in my world, actually get large elementals, and these 2 slaves were, like, defective. But Draven casts Fly on Black, and he gives Angel a lift up to engage the enemy assassin, and she delivers a pretty good airdrop attack. So after a parting shot, the Kua dives into the nearest water trough. And they know he's a freaking fish man. Obviously, he's at an advantage in the water, but it's 2-on-1, and they don't want him to escape and sneak attack sniper them again later. So Angel follows, landing on the 6-inch wide wall of the pool. But the ledge is slippery, and despite her acrobatic skills, she rolls pretty badly, so she slips and falls in, and that's when they learn that the water is electrified. Next time on Tales from My D&D Campaign. I'm adjusting my schedule at work in the hopes of getting out the next episode a little faster. In the meantime, add your questions and comments below, add me on Twitter and Facebook, and if you've already subscribed, share this playlist with a friend. I was not kidding. 4d6 electrical damage per round, fortitude save for half, and of course, it does not harm the Kua.